Welcome back to A View from Mulberry Street, and this is Matthew J. Mary, coming to you from the Matt Cave. You know, a lot of people have said to me, hey, Matt, can't you afford to do your podcast in a studio? Or can't you get some decent background? You know, get some kind of a background scene of Lower Manhattan or something. But, you know, I decided to make this podcast just a real thing. And we're doing it from my home office. And especially since the pandemic has started, I very rarely go to 30 Wall Street, where my office is located in Manhattan. I do most of my work out of this room. This is, in addition to a home office, it also serves as a closet, as you could see. Right now, it is winter time, so I'm storing my summer stuff in the closets to my right. So here we are in the Matt Cave. And, you know, I think we bounce the idea around a lot about what the background should be, but this is real. This is where I am every day. It used to be my son's bedroom a long time ago. Anyhow, today we thought that we'd take a stroll down Broadway and down Sunset Park to the movies. A trip to the mob movies, the gangster movies. Wow. You know, when I was a little kid, the gangster movies were very straightforward. You had, you know, Edward G. Robinson and Paul Muni and James Cagney, and the big movies were Little Caesar and White Heat. And all of them were kind of simple. And then they became more sophisticated in time. I'm going to talk about several movies that I liked or disliked, but nevertheless are famous in terms of this kind of genre. I'm especially going to focus on the movie called Donnie Brasco because I happen to know just about every individual character that was portrayed in that movie. And I have to say, I didn't like it. It took me 3 sittings to get through the movie Donnie Brasco without getting up. And I'll explain why later on. But, you know, when you talk about mob movies, The Godfather, I guess, is the granddaddy godfather of all the mob movie genre. And when you talk about Godfather 1 and Godfather 2, you just can't beat it. I don't know who Mario Puzo is. I don't know where he got his information. I could certainly say to you that there's no doubt in my mind that the things portrayed in the Godfather movies, Godfather 1 and Godfather 2, some of those events may have come from real life incidents, but for the most part, it's fiction. It's not about anyone. I know you could say Johnny Fontaine is Frank Sinatra. True enough, but when you think about it, I've heard of a lot of things, but I've never heard of a horse's head being placed in someone's bed. But anyhow, The Godfather was a great movie, and I've watched that over and over and over. And unlike any other movie that I've ever seen in my life, and I've been around a long time, The Godfather movies, 1 and 2, are the kind of movies that you could just tune in on any scene and enjoy it, scene by scene by scene. And in fact, when we start putting guests on to this show, I think one of the guests that I'd like to get in the future will be the fellow who played Carlo in the Godfather 1 movie. And he's a great friend of mine. I'll talk a little bit about him later on. But I learned a lot from him about what was going on the set. Gianni Russo. I'm speaking of Gianni Russo, born and bred in Staten Island, knows so many people that I know and through the years, I struck up a friendship with Johnny. He was on my radio show a couple of times. I've been on his podcast. And the behind-the-scenes tale of the Godfather movie is quite interesting. And we're going to do that in the future when we start to get guests on the show. But I guess Godfather is one of my favorite movies of all times. When you talk about, what's real and not real, the first real gangster movie that I ever saw and was impressed by was Mean Streets with Robert De Niro. And not that the movie was so great, but it was an accurate portrayal of where I lived. And I'm talking about Mulberry Street. I'm talking about Little Italy, talking about what we used to call the 6th Ward, talking about the 4th Ward, Knickerbocker Village, where I was raised. And someone asked me one time, are there really people like Johnny? The character portrayed by Robert De Niro. And I said to that person, I have met 100 Johnnies. And when I use that expression 100, I don't mean 99. I mean 100 or over. There's so many characters who lived in our neighborhood in Lower Manhattan that were like Johnny. And the character of Charlie, who is portrayed by Harvey Keitel, well, that was me. Always trying to get someone out of trouble, and usually successful. I had a great batting average of saving people from getting killed down on the Lower East Side in the 1960s, 70s, 80s. Well, who knows? It never stops. But that was a great movie, Mean Streets. Of course, Bronx Tale was a great movie. Now, the Robert De Niro movie. And Robert De Niro is a great actor and director. Bronx Tale just told the story of about how people live in the Bronx and all over in Italian neighborhoods. It was an accurate portrayal, for the most part, not in every sense, but I liked it, and I thought it was real. I didn't know the real characters, didn't know it was based on, but it certainly was something that I enjoyed watching. Goodfellas, that's another movie that I did not know the characters upon which the movie was based. And in fact, people have told me that the Robert De Niro character that was based on Jimmy Burke is nothing like Jimmy Burke. So be it. I mean, as far as a movie goes, if you're going to enjoy these movies, and if you know the real-life characters in the movies, you've got to try to forget it, because it's very, very rare that any Hollywood production accurately portrays real life. Other movies that were pretty good. Casino. I liked Casino. I mean, it was entertaining, but it was brutal. And I've met a lot of brutal people in my life. I met a lot of brutal Italian Americans in my life. But the brutality that was expressed in Casino was far above and beyond anything that I've seen in real life. The meanness of it all, the betrayal of it all. Yes, betrayal is common on the mean streets of the Lower East Side, Little Italy, Knickerbocker Village, but not the way that it was portrayed in Casino. So I liked Casino as a movie, but didn't like it in terms of how it really portrayed the Italian Americans in the production. Another good movie was Black Mass. I've read a lot. I did not know Whitey Bulger. I happen to have read a lot about him, and the production of the movie Black Mass was a very extraordinary success in terms of reproducing the material in the book Black Mass. There was another movie called Road to Perdition. That was with Tom Hanks and Paul Newman. Another kind of sad movie, not real. I've never heard of any gangsters. No gangsters I have ever known or heard of have tried to kill a little kid. Usually, in real life, they would take their chances. As many of you may remember, in the movie Road to Perdition, Tom Hanks' little son happens to witness a murder. And as a result of that, his whole family is killed, and Tom Hanks goes on the lam trying to save his little boy. Only in Hollywood. That's not real life. But one scene I did like about that movie is at the end when Paul Newman is about to be killed and Tom Hanks is the one who is going to pull the trigger. Paul Newman turns to Tom Hanks and says, "I'm glad that it's you." And that may have a lot of striking correlations to real life and people being killed by sometimes their former best friends. The new movie, when I say new, recent, comparatively speaking, is The Irishman. Again, Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci. What a cast, but a little bit over the hill. I mean, casting all of those old men in the parts that they were playing just was a little bit too much, but it still was enjoyable, even though it was 3 hours. Enjoyable in spite of the fact that the factual basis for the movie was all a bunch of baloney. The idea that the Irishman, the main character, Frank, who's portrayed by Robert De Niro, it killed all the people he said he did is preposterous. I don't think he killed Jimmy Hoffa, and I know for a fact that he did not kill Joe Gallo. And I'm not letting any cats out of any bag when I say to you, everyone knows who killed crazy Joe Gallo. And it wasn't the Irishman. So, when you look at these movies, you have to try to separate what they try to portray as a fact from it just being fiction. And if you can look at it as fiction, it's okay. L.A. Confidential. That was a real cop movie. If you know as many cops as I do, you tend to look at that movie, L.A. Confidential, and you say, oh my God, where did they get this story? Because it seems so true to life in terms of the characters that were portrayed in L.A. Confidential. But one of my favorite all-time movies has to be the cult movie, what has become a cult movie, called Reservoir Dogs by Quentin Tarantino. I have never seen anything done by Quentin Tarantino that I did not like. Another great movie of his is Pulp Fiction. I mean, beyond the realm of any other type of entertainment in this genre, Pulp Fiction is something that's riveting and keeps your attention. But getting back to Reservoir Dogs, which was the story of a bunch of Irish guys who were bank robbers and gangsters, that movie is filled with blood and filled with compassion and filled with emotion and filled with all sorts of power-packed performances by the actors, including Harvey Keitel and all the others who were in that movie. And I was sitting down with a bunch of lawyers one day, young lawyers, and they were talking about Reservoir Dogs, the cult movie. And I said, yeah, I love that movie. And one young lawyer said to me, he said, you know what? I love that movie, but it's just not real. There can never be people like the characters in that movie in real life. And I said to him, son, let me tell you something. I know 100, I always use that expression. It's not just, a figure of speech. I know 100 Irishmen who are as crazy as the people in that movie and as intense in their criminality as the people in that movie. So Reservoir Dogs is not just a good movie, but it portrays characters that may not be based on any real person, but are based on a whole lot of people who are like that in real life. Pulp Fiction, that was just an unbelievable experiment by a director. The way he put that out, someday I hope they put it in chronological order like they did The Godfather. Two other movies, both with Al Pacino. Carlito's Way, which is written by my friend, Judge Edwin Torres, someone that was a Supreme Court judge for, I guess, over 20 years. He was a criminal defense lawyer. He's an assistant district attorney. He was someone that I admired very, very much, considered to be, in my professional capacity, a friend. And he also is a great, great writer. And he wrote Carlito's Way and several other books, which became movies. And the problem I had with Carlito's Way and Scarface with Al Pacino, a little bit the same problem that I have with Donnie Brasco, is that Mr. Al Pacino may be one of the greatest actors who ever lived. But in some of these movies, I feel that he was just overacting, just a little too much, laying it on too thick. Once Upon a Time in America tells a story that is often forgotten in today's world. It's about the Jewish gangsters of the Lower East Side. And let me tell you, I never got to meet Meyer Lansky, but my mother is good friends with his daughter. But I met a lot of Jewish guys on the Lower East Side who are older than me, who are very, very, very tough and respected. So the movie Once Upon a Time in America is something that I think everyone should see. I want to get back to Donnie Brasco. Okay, Donnie Brasco, Agent Joseph Pistone, a real-life character, someone that I knew quite well. When I first watched the movie Donnie Brasco in a movie theater, after about a half hour, I had to just walk out. The portrayal of all the people in the movie who were real-life characters to me was so off that it annoyed me a great deal. So much so that I had to walk out of the theater. My friends were like, what's wrong, Matt? What's why are you so upset? I just couldn't watch it. And I tried again about a year later when it came on TV, and I couldn't get through the movie. Well, I tried again about a year after that, and I said to myself, if you're going to watch this movie, you have to forget that you know the real characters. You have to forget that they claim this is based on real events. And you just have to watch it as a movie. And when I was determined to do that, I actually enjoyed Donnie Brasco quite a bit. And I have to say, the performance of Al Pacino was Academy Award caliber. But let me tell you something else. The portrayal of Benjamin Ruggiero, also known as Lefty Guns, by Al Pacino in the movie Donnie Brasco was nothing like the real thing. In the movie, I think Pacino was trying to portray Lefty, Benjamin Ruggiero, as a downtrodden guy, someone who's down and out, someone who's always missing the boat, someone who is always on the verge of making it, but just don't get there. And then he runs into Donnie Brasco, hits the lotto, everything's going to be great, and it turns out to be a total disaster, the Titanic, okay? Well, I understand the point of the movie, Donnie Brasco, and I understand the purpose of Al Pacino's portrayal. But Benjamin Ruggiero, Lefty Guns, was nothing like the character that you see in the movie Donnie Brasco. He was one of the most handsome guys that I've ever met. He was suave, debonair, charming in every way. Lefty was always dressed impeccably. I mean, when he had a suit and tie on, he was a killer. I mean, a good-looking guy like no one else. And when he was just hanging around his social club, just dressed in slacks and a shirt, he was always dressed perfectly. Always expensive clothes, expensive shoes, always nothing out of place, including his hair. Lefty's hair, not one hair on his head ever blew in the wind. And he didn't use any grease on it either. One time, we were on a boat, a motorboat, and everyone's hair was flying around except for Lefty. And I said to him, I said, Benny, tell me, why is your hair always in place? And he just smiled. And I said, well, what do you use? What do you put on it, Vaseline? And he said, put your hand through my hair. And I put my hand through his hair. It was soft as silk. And to this day, you know, I'll never figure out how never a hair out of place. And by the way, Lefty never wore a hat. No hat like you see in the movie Donnie Brasco. He never even wore a nice hat. He just never, he was always hatless, always spotless, always perfectly dressed, and always well-spoken. He was no bungling idiot. Lefty had a golden tongue, not a silver tongue, a golden tongue. He could talk his way out of any problem and talk his way into any situation that he wanted to. And some people might describe Lefty as a ladies' man. All I could say is he didn't chase the ladies. They chased him. And, you know, so when I look at the Al Pacino portrayal of Lefty Guns, Benjamin Ruggiero, and Donnie Brasco, I just have to shake my head. But, you know, in real life, Lefty was one of the most interesting characters that I've ever met. He was a friend, 24 years my senior. And I have to say that I always enjoyed every moment being with him. He was the type of guy that always made sure that the kids had a good time. I spent many a holiday with him. You know, after I'd finished with my own family, I'd always go to Lefty's house, and that of his beautiful wife, Nina, his wonderful daughters, and his son. And we always had a whole bunch of friends with us on every holiday and out in Greenwood Lake. And during the course of those days, I think I'm going back to, you know, focusing on 1980, 1981, I met Donnie Brasco, Joseph Pistone. And I never thought that he was an FBI agent, nor did I think that he was some kind of, you know, infiltrator. But I did think, and I did tell him one day, Donnie, you know, why are you here? Here was a guy who no one knew. No one knew his mother. No one knew his father. And when I say that, that was the norm. And where we came from, the 4th Ward and the 6th Ward, Mulberry Street, Knickerbocker Village, everybody knew who you were and who your mother and your father was and who your grandfather was, okay? And that's the way we grew up. Donnie Brasco appeared on the scene, brought around by a fellow named Tony Mira, who is also a character. I could do a whole podcast about Tony Mira, Mirra. And Tony Mira brought Donnie Brasco around, introduced him to Lefty, and Donnie kind of pushed himself into the crowd. And one day, I said to Donnie, real name Joseph Pistone, I said, you know, Donnie, what are you doing here? And he got very offended and said to me, well, what do you mean by that? Little did I know who he really was. And I said, you know, Donnie, I don't know where you came from, but from the way you speak, you seem to be an educated man, and you just don't fit in to Madison Street, 41 Madison Street, Lefty Social Club. This was a pretty rough place to be. He was a kind of a refined person, both the way he spoke and the way he carried himself. And anyhow, I don't know if Donnie Brasco, agent Joe Pistone, thought I was on to him. I wasn't. But he got angry and he said, you're insulting me. I'm going to tell Lefty what you said to me, that I don't belong around here. And anyhow, that was the one and only time that Lefty and I had an argument where he raised his voice to me, and quite rightly. He said, hey, Matt, what are you doing? I'm making money with this guy, and you're telling him he doesn't belong here? Where did he come from? He said, cut it out. Mind your own business. Well, anyhow, I had to apologize to Lefty that day, willingly. 100%. I was wrong. I should have been minding my own business, but unintentionally, I stumbled onto something, and later, realized why. I thought Donnie Brasco wasn't a true fit for Mulberry Street or Madison Street. And, the story of Donnie Brasco is a big one. A lot of it was told in the movie, but there's a lot more to it than that. In fact, maybe someday when we start having guests on this podcast, not yet, but when we start doing that, he's one person that I'd like to get on to talk to him about how he felt about those days when he was an undercover FBI agent. And let me tell you, he was around, I think, for 4, 5, 6 years, and he established very, very close friendships, not only with the so-called gangsters that he was investigating, but with their families. And I could tell you that when it came to pass and was revealed that Donnie Brasco was an FBI agent, a lot of people were brokenhearted. A lot of people didn't believe it. I could tell you, Lefty Ruggiero is dead now. But he called me one night and he said, Matt, I was a lawyer then. We were in Cherry Street Park, and he said, Matt, is it possible for the FBI to fabricate a picture? I said, why? And he said, they showed me a picture of Donnie graduating from the FBI Academy. And I said to him, Ben, they have the ability to do that, but I don't think that's the case here. If 2 FBI agents came to your house to tell you that, the jig is up on this, you've got to believe that it's true. And so at the end of the Donnie Brasco affair, Benjamin Lefty Ruggiero wound up doing 20 years in prison. Maybe close to 60 or 70 others wound up in jail over that infiltration by the FBI. And at least 2 people wound up dead. One is Sonny Black, Dominic Napolitano, and the other was Tony Mira. Both of them apparently were killed as a result of their close relationship with Donnie Brasco, Agent Joe Pistone. So, for now, that's our trip to the movies. In the coming weeks, we're going to talk about other things. Maybe we'll circle back and talk about Donnie Brasco again. We're certainly going to circle back to Knickerbocker Village and the 4th Ward. And, of course, always circle back to where it all started for me, Mulberry Street.